Hey guys, OGalbina here, and today I have a pretty quick video for you guys. Let me know what you guys think, and it'd be something that we haven't really done too much on the channel here. And we're gonna be doing a tier list on each of the fully evolved starter Pokemon. We're kind of gonna be ranking them on how good they are as per their value in a draft league setting. I play a lot of draft league Pokemon on the channel if you're new, which is a competitive format in which you draft teams and go up against other coaches who have draft teams and stuff like that. So it's a counter team metagame, and you know, some Pokemon are gonna be better than others, obviously. Now, that being said, I'm going to kind of, again, evaluate them as per their value. Now, a Pokemon like Blastoise is generally seen as worse than something like Greninja, but I'm going to evaluate them at their price point and how worth I think they are drafting in that sense. So, yeah, if you guys do enjoy like these tier list content, when it pertains to Draft League, please let me know. I would love to do more of these. I think it's fun. It gives me more of an idea, an opportunity to just talk about different, Pokemon and concepts and things like that. And let me know what you want to see me rank next in the next video like this. So yeah, with that being said, these Pokemon are all in random order. I'm kind of just going to start right here. I don't know if I'm going to use much E tier, so we'll just go ahead and delete this row. I think that every one of these Pokemon has some niche viability. And I'm not gonna be like any of these are just absolutely awful, even if I wouldn't necessarily draft them, right? Unfortunately, we're gonna start off with Samurott here, and I'm gonna put in D. There's just no like discernible qualities that really make me think like, wow, I really need to snag me a Samurott on this team, if you get what I mean. Looking at its stats, it's incredibly mediocre, with its highest being 108. So it's well balanced, but especially in a draft where your water is often a really bulky centerpiece to your team, it's not great in that regards because no recovery and very mediocre bulk. And offensive waters are also great to have, but there's so many other options that don't have base 70 speed and very middling attack and special attack stats. Now it can go mixed, which is always a cool option. It can be physical SD, it can be special, it can be specs, it can be mixed life orb, things like that, but all you're getting out of it. And if there's other low tier offensive waters at this thing's or around this thing's price point, maybe a little bit more expensive, maybe even a little bit cheaper, that I feel like are going to kind of fit your squads a little bit better. So unfortunately, I'm not a big Samurott fan. I don't think I would ever draft it on purpose personally. I cannot imagine a scenario in which I was like, dang, I need me a Samurott in this squad. Thankfully, though, we kind of like jump the spectrums, and we kind of see like a bottom tier starter up to a top tier starter. Rillaboom's amazing. I am a huge Rillaboom stan. I know it's kind of hit or miss with a lot of people. Some people think Rillaboom's great. Some people think it's kind of overrated. And some people just think it's bad. I am 100% one of the Rillaboom is great, guys. Grassy Surge as an ability is incredible, especially in conjunction with Grassy Glide, giving it basically like grass type extreme speed while that's out, while also being boosted by Grassy Terrain. It's a phenomenal move, and it's a phenomenal Pokemon to get it. It has great coverage options like Drain Punch, Superpower, High Horsepower, things like that for bulky steals. It grabs some momentum with U-Turn. It can knock things off, and I think that's actually a big key when it comes to Rillaboom, is the ability to spam knockoff, especially when your typical switch-ins to grass types, and especially offensive grass types are going to be flying types and fire types. Forcing those things in and getting a guaranteed knockoff on them so that they can be chipped down the rest of the game by boots. Mwah, amazing. Mons like Torn T, you can initially, switch in, check Rillaboom, you knock it once, and then you could potentially, if it's not like a really bulky variant of Torn T, like if it's just max HP, I believe there's a pretty good chance to just nuke it with a banded Woodhammer the next time it comes in. Woodhammer is also a great tool. Swords Dance is a great option on this thing. I personally love Assault Vest Rillaboom. I think Assault Vest Rillaboom is amazing as a nice spongy pivot. It just does a ton of damage as well. So I really like Rillaboom. I think it's definitely worth like the 14 point, pick that it usually is. I don't actually know what usually Rillaboom's priced at. I know it's a, decently high tiered mod, but I also think it's very much so worth it in drafting it a good majority of the time. And it's something I've used multiple times and definitely really enjoyed. So I definitely say give Rillaboom a shot, even if you're not super big on it. Right now, at least. It's usually 14, 15. I just looked it up on the side, which is kind of why I was lagging. Next up, we have Torterra, which now we go right in the middle. I think Torterra, while it's typically a very low-tiered Pokemon, it's typically more of a value pick. It's great for roll compression, giving you a very solid ground resist as well as the ground type, which is a really clutch aspect of it. Now, obviously, you're going to want to make sure you have solid ice resist around this thing as well as a good water switch in. If you don't have something that guaranteed, like, switches in and deals with bulky waters, you're not going to want to draft Torterra as like a low tier grass or anything like that, low tier ground resist, but it does a really good job at being the ground resist, being a rocker, being a ground type. It can set up and sweep with Swords Dance and Rock Polish. It can be annoying and defensive as well. There's a lot of cool things that, that the, Torterra can do. It can roar things around, just be a general nuisance. I actually really like Torterra. I've drafted it multiple times as a really low tier, ground option or a low tier, ground resist option. And I think it's really good at, its price point. Now, again, will it be better than some of the other Pokemon in Seed? No, but for its price point, I think it's pretty solid. Speaking of Pokemon in Seed, I'm going to put Delphox here. I think Delphox has some pretty niche, cool uses. I think it has a really solid speed tier, and I believe it's like 105, right? Let's check. 104, so very close. It's very strong with base 114, and Fire plus Psychic is a great stab combination. I think especially in a Boots metagame, it definitely has potential to come in and just be a general nuisance. It was pretty solid without it, and with it, it's going to be pretty solid. It has good coverage in like Fire, Psychic, Fairy, Grass, and Ghost and like Shadow Ball and things like that, which is always a really cool option. It can Will-O-Wisp things and be annoying. It can be a Wish Passer with Wish Tricked. It can trick fat things and, be a nuisance that way. It can use Mystical Fire, which is one of my favorite moves to use on fire types, to really, really bully down special attackers that want to switch in. You even make it to where you could probably 1v1 some waters without Toxic, which I think is really awesome. I think it would really benefit from a better secondary ability, secondary hidden ability. I know right now it has Magician. I know in a lot of ROM hacks it gets Magic Guard, which would be amazing for this thing to just not have to run Boots or not have to worry about hazards in general or Toxics and things like that for the fatter sets, for the Calm Mind sets, for the Wish Texting sets, things like that. But overall, this is a great, I wouldn't say great. It's a pretty solid Pokemon. It's hard to justify drafting it in a lot of teams, but I definitely don't think that it's bad in the slightest. I definitely think it's really cool. Next up, we have Feraligatr, and I really want to put Feraligatr in A tier. I really do. But I don't think I can justify doing so. I'm going to put Feraligatr in B tier. We'll even put it at the top of B tier. This Pokemon is a mon I always want to draft, and the few times I have gotten the chance to draft it, it is so ridiculously strong for no reason, or the amount of times I faced it and had a Slowbro and been like, yo, I'm good, I got a Slowbro. And then they run Swords Dance, and I forget to be Colbert because I kind of under-prep for Feraligatr, and then I get O-Code, and I'm like, damn. Aqua Jet and Liquidation kill the rest of my Pokemon. This thing is ridiculously strong with Sheer Force, though. It has a pretty mediocre speed tier, but it has the bulk to facilitate its own setup. Like, it's, decently naturally bulky, and despite only being 105 attack, Sheer Force all the more so makes up for it, in my opinion, obviously. With a Life Orb, this thing's terrifying. It can Dragon Dance and Sweep. It can Swords Dance and Sweep / Break, which is really cool. And I've even seen special variants of like Ice Beam, with like Sheer Force boosted Ice Beams and Scalds and things like that. Really, really beating down different things. I've seen mix sets. I've seen Agility Special even put in some decent work. But you're typically going to see this thing do one of two things, and they're very similar things. It's going to be Dragon Dance, it's going to try to sweep, or it's going to be Swords Dance, it's going to try and sleep / break. And I think it's very solid at that job, personally. Okay, next up, we have Typhlosion, and personally, I'm not a big Typhlosion fan. I'm going to move it down here in D tier. You couldn't really get me to draft Typhlosion at its price point with all the other better fires or mons that, perform Typhlosion's roles well at its price point, because I think it really lacks power without specs. I think it really lacks a solid speed tier, and is very liable to get Revenge and chip down, if not Scarf. But then you're struggling to keep rocks away for your Typhlosion, and I really don't think that value is worth it. Now, granted, there are matchups in which Typhlosion just clicks Eruption, and you're like, damn, this is tough. But in the same vein, that just means an offensive fire in general would have had a great time, because this thing does not have good coverage. It's just Eruption and like Focus Blast and other fire moves. So it doesn't have great coverage, especially without hidden power this generation. I know a lot of people like Typhlosion as a lower tier fire. I personally just can't get behind it and can't really justify drafting it. That's just me though. Next, I almost want to put this thing in D tier too, but I'm actually going to put it in C tier, and that is going to be Sceptile. Now, with Big Sceptile here, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I do think that it has its niche viability on like different terrain teams. I see a lot of people, I got swept by a Sceptile in BBL last season by Aprator. That was embarrassing. But it has the potential to end games like that. It's very fast, and while it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, a very fast grass like Sceptile that forces pretty specific switch-ins can be a real big nuisance with like sub-leech sets as well. You've seen Swords Dance sets put in some work, and you know, it has good physical and special coverage. And you know, it has its speed. It just really lacks bulk, and it's not the strongest thing in the world, but I do think that you can get some value out of it depending on what your team is. It's just not a mon for me, I guess. So I'll keep it in C just because I do recognize its viability, but not for me personally. Next up we have Decidueye. I'm gonna put Decidueye in A tier. This is a Pokemon I always tend to draft as one of my ground resists if I don't have one. It's like round 5, 6, something like that. It's this guy, Delmise or Serena, and I always prefer Decidueye. I think it's a very, very versatile Pokemon that kind of gets slept on in a lot of instances. It can be physical and be very solid physical with like Spirit Shackle and Poltergeist, Shadow Sneak, Leaf Blade, Sucker Punch, things like that. U-turn for momentum. It can also be special with like Nasty Plot and things like that. So it can set up on both sides. If you're playing in a league that allows Baton Pass in any form, you can pass Swords Dancers or Baton or Nasty Plots out with that. You can defog. You have reliable recovery and roost as well, which is great. It gets toxic. It gets knockoff as well to remove items and facilitate the rest of your offense, which is great. It's just an overall really, really solid Pokemon for its price point, and I really do love drafting this thing. And it really kind of puts the bow on a lot of teams for me. Next up, we've been pulling on who I'm also going to put in A tier. This is another Pokemon that I feel is a little bit hit or miss with a lot of people, in the sense that they don't know if they like it or not, or it's a lot of people really struggle with it in the sense that it's not a great fire resist, obviously, being water steel. But I think if you can get past that, you'll realize how good the water steel typing is defensively. And if this thing keeps Roost like I got in PLA, in Scarlet and Violet, if it keeps Roost, oh man, this thing's gonna be so good. This thing with reliable recovery, water steel reliable recovery, is really, really nasty. It's a great defogger. It just spreads Scald burns and Tox burns. It throws off big ice beams, and you can even be special with like agility, Scald, ice beam, like Grass Knot, and just mow through teams potentially. Not Scald, you'll probably be Surf or Hydro Pump, but you get my point. It's an amazing Pokemon. I think it's a great glue piece. It's a solid rocker, solid defogger, and it really roll compresses and gets a lot of things for you. If you have an additional fire, just like a rock type or a dragon or something like that you feel comfortable switching into Flare Blitzes, I think this thing is just far and above one of the better like mid-tier waters to draft. So great mod. And one good water starter to my favorite water starter, and actually a water starter I drafted with Employee and won championships with. I've drafted these two as double water multiple times. It's going to be our next S tier in Greninja. Those of you who have only played Gen 8 Galar Dex Wi-Fi and have not gotten to use Greninja, and this is Torrent Greninja, not Battle Bond or Protean, those are obviously S tier because they're broken and banned for a reason. But just regular Greninja on its own is one of my favorite like tier 2 range Pokemon to draft in general. I will draft it at any point possible in round 2, 3, around there. It's really fast. It sets up spikes, which is great for the rest of your offense, especially if you have like a good strong offensive fighting, things like that, or a good strong offensive psychic. It does really, really well with that. It can grab momentum and U-turn, throw off big dark pulses, surfs and ice beams and water shurikens, and there are so many matchups where offensive like Specs or Life Orb Grim just doesn't have good switch-ins, especially in conjunction with like the physical coverage that it gets, like low kick and gunk shot and things like that. It gets a really fast taunt. It's even a really fast haze, which I have definitely seen come in clutch before, and it also gets Grass Knot as cool coverage as well too, to really bully down other waters. And again, really it's kind of the ability for Greninja to force very specific switch-ins and get up spikes very reliably despite its really mediocre bulk. I love Greninja. I think it's an amazing Pokemon, and I definitely think you should try it out if you haven't done so already. Okay, next, well, we're perfectly balanced right here, and I'd love to keep it that way. We kind of have to do something else, and we're gonna do move Emboar down here in B. I'm probably gonna put it at the bottom of B. Now I know Kurt loves this Pokemon. I know he absolutely adores this thing, and it is strong. It's a lot like Feraligatr in the sense that it just kind of doesn't have switch-ins, but it's for a different reason. It's not setting up and just threatening endgames. It's coming in the mid-game with a Scarf or with a Band, and it's throwing off Reckless, Boosted, Flare Blitzes, and Wild Charges. This thing is so hard to switch into. It doesn't even need to click Wild Charge half the time, it feels like. If it's like a Band variant, your Water type might get 2-KO'd after hazards by that Flare Blitz, which is really, really nuts. You can also throw on big superpowers, Earthquake, Brick Break if you don't want to have that, damage back too. You get Heat Crash, which is another cool option because he is a thick lad right here. You can have cool coverage options like Grass Knot, which is pretty cool, depending on you know, the Pokemon that you're facing that you're trying to take on. It gets Wisp, it gets Yawn for like some niche support things. It even gets Scald, which is very funny. Probably because it's just a fire type in Gen 5 and they wanted to give it to it. So I think this one is really cool. Again, it is just kind of hard justifying it in general over other offensive fires, or just drafting an offensive fire in general. It just isn't a needed thing. So you don't typically see Emboar drafted a lot, but it is definitely a very, very solid Pokemon. Very much so worth drafting though. Okay, next up, we got our next S tier in Swampert. What's up with these, and there's all some of my favorite design starters too, so maybe it's just me having good taste, but Pert has always been really reliable in past generations, getting up rocks, throwing off Scalds, but this gen, I really think it took like a big step up and really separated itself from Seismith and made itself much better in my opinion, in the sense that it might not have Water Absorb, but we get momentum with Swampert now, and I think that is absolutely amazing. Letting this thing function as an even better pivot, probably one of the best pivots in the game, being able to come in, sponge a hit, flip turn out, get into your offense. Come in, Stealth Rock, flip turn out, or even lead potentially and do that. And go physical or special and has sufficient coverage on both sides. Like on the physical side, it gets Earth Power, or on the physical side, it gets Earthquake, Ice Punch, Liquidation this gen, which is definitely better than Waterfall. And on the special side, you get Earth Power, Scald, and Ice Beam, which are all very, very viable options. You can flip, turn around. You can even throw off, like, I believe it gets, like, Sludge Wave and stuff like that, as well. Let me check that. I don't remember if I'm just tripping. I feel like it gets Sludge Wave. It does, which is pretty cool. You can spread around Toxics, but again, I think that just, like, amazing roll compression that Swampert gives you in that water ground typing, as well as momentum and rocks and just that great bulky tank pivot. This thing is amazing. I love Leftovers plus Protect on Swampert as well, really keeping it healthy despite its lack of reliable recovery. And at its price point, I draft this thing any day of the week. It's amazing. Next though, we do have a pretty unfortunate Pokemon here in Meganium. Again, it's not that Meganium, I think, has no valuable qualities. It's very bulky, it gets screens, it gets cool utility moves, but so does most other grass types, minus the screens part. Some don't get that, but really what you need Meganium to do for you, there are so many better options, just a little bit more expensive than it, that can kind of fulfill that role for you. Usually if I'm like in and out of yawning, it's like midnight when I'm recording this, I'm a little tired. But there's just so many other things that can kind of fulfill Meganium's role. I don't think I need to go too in depth on why it sucks. It's just, what does it do? You know, not that I don't know what it does, but what does it do that other things cannot already do for you, right? And I think that's where Meganium kind of falls flat. Now we're kind of evening up these tiers again, as we have Charizard here at number 3, and I'm actually going to move this thing probably to the front of it. I think this thing on Sun has the potential to just be an absolute nuke with solar power. I think that's a very cool option that we don't see explored very often. Typically Sun is Venusaur, Torkoal, and then hopefully a Victini, but I've never really seen Charizard thrive on Sun. I'd love to see someone give that a go and maybe you know, kind of use Charizard as a little bit more of a weather centerpiece, because it's definitely a very, very solid Pokemon. But it also can function pretty well defensively this gen. Fire Flying is a really solid defensive typing when you don't have to take into account Stealth Rocks being omnipresent, and while they still may be pretty relevant and around a lot, Boots really kind of mitigate that. Now I kind of pigeonhole Zard into Boots a little bit more often, but really I think that's a trade Zard is willing to take, because if you told me to make this list in Gen 7, it would be right down there with Typhlosion. Same stats, it's just Zard has a little bit more defensive utility and is a little bit better on like a niche archetype of a team being Sun, which I think gives it some viability. Again, it's just not a personal mon for me. Another way to kind of separate these tiers, I guess, is like B and up, I would draft these Pokemon. C and down, probably not. And for that reason, despite no, you're not an A tier mon. Despite me thinking it's the worst in B tier, I'm going to put Inteleon here, as I know a lot of people, again, also don't like Inteleon because it's not very versatile. It does one thing. It comes in, it clicks like, you know, Specs moves, and I guess 2 things. It can focus energy up with Scope Punch too, and Sniper through things and sweep that way, which are both really cool options, and really Water plus Ice is all you need in a lot of matchups, especially with Focus Energy allowing it to blow through a lot of water type checks, just by raw powering through them, especially due to the fact that most of them can't really damage Inteleon immediately back. It doesn't really threaten with a burn or anything like that because you're special. This Pokemon definitely has its, viability, and it has a really great speed tier. So if you're getting low on points, you need a little bit better of a speed tier and a good special breaker, I think Inteleon is potentially worth drafting for you. And I've definitely drafted it a couple times now, actually. In NCP, which didn't work out the best, but I also had in Trick House, which I really liked it there, and I had a decent season there this last season in Gengar. So I would definitely recommend maybe trying it out once or twice. It's not the best mod in the world, and it doesn't fit right for some people, but it might fit right for you, and I don't think it's worth, writing it off and, completely, if that makes any sense. Next up, we have Prim Arena, another amazing Pokemon. I really like this thing. I think I'm actually going to put it at the top of A tier. The one thing that really I kind of struggle with Prim is whether or not I want to draft another water or another fairy. I usually end up drafting another water, but a more offensive one to kind of take a little bit of pressure off of Prim. But I think it kind of gets overwhelmed if it's like your only defensive option, which was kind of the case in my pack season this season. I felt like I had to run Rest Talk every week, or it just wasn't going to check the things I needed it to. But Water Fairy is such a solid defensive typing, and it's such a solid offensive typing too, in conjunction with Ice Beam, Energy Ball, Flip Turn for momentum, which is great. It got Calm Mind this gen, as well as Draining Kiss for, really solid recovery on setup sets and things like that. So this thing with an Assault Vest, with Rest Talk, with a specs on it, even Scarf Prim has its viability. This thing is really tough to deal with, and you kind of have to identify what set it is in order to know how you're going to try and pivot in and deal with that thing. So I like it a lot. I think it's a very solid Pokemon personally. Next up though, we have Blaziken, and a lot of these last starters I'm actually a big fan of, so I think these are like the main ones I don't like down here, because Blaziken's a great Pokemon, man, and this is non-Speed Boost. Speed Boost should always be banned. I'm 100% one of those people. I think that mon is ridiculously busted when it has Speed Boost, but that's a discussion for another day, I suppose. Let me know if you'd want to see like a discussion on like which mons I think should be banned always, like the borderline mons. But Blaziken is still a great Scarfer. It's also a great wall breaker. I think people really sleep on the aspect of Blaziken in it being a physical special or mixed wall breaker with like a Life Orb. Nuts. Life Orb overheat Blaziken and then throwing off a close combat the turn after or something like that is really, really difficult to deal with for a lot of teams, because a lot of teams will typically also just shoehorn like physical water, here you go, or like physical Xmon, and then just get like nuked by a Life Orb Thunder Punch or something like that, which I think is really interesting. It gets knockoff Earthquake, U-turn the gem, which is great. It gets Aura Sphere, Vacuum Wave, it can Swords Dance, it can Agility, it can't Nasty Plot. That would be pretty darn cool. If you play in a Baton Pass League, again, it's another one that can kind of like pass out a ST or an Agility or something like that, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it's just an overall really solid Pokemon. I really enjoy using the wall breaking aspect of it and bringing like a Life Orb variant and really trying to find that position in and just clicking a button. I think it's great. Next up, we have what I think might be our last S tier. I don't know. I'm still debating on another one later. But Cinderace, this is like my all-time kill leader, which I think is insane. Because I actually hate the way this Pokemon looks, so it kind of breaks our streak of me really liking the designs of our S tier starters and draft. But yeah, this thing is absolutely amazing, man. It's speed tier plus U-turn, and then all of its high base power moves and Pyro Ball, Gong Shot, High Jump Kick, things like that is just astronomically amazing. The only downside is like none of those moves are accurate, so you do run the risk of missing. I've lost many a game to Cinderace deciding to not hit a Pyro Ball, Gong Shot, or High Jump Kick at some point in time in my career. But when you do, this thing puts on immense pressure, really, especially with U-turn. And again, this is non-Libero, because I think Libero should always be banned. But, again, we could talk about that in another video if you guys want. But yeah, I really like this thing. It really just kind of forces in its own checks and chips them down, especially in conjunction with rocks or spikes and things like that, to where you can come in as a banned variant later in the game and only have that water at like 70%, and then it comes in on 70, takes rocks, and just get 2-tap by Power Ball. Or you catch it one time with a High Jump Kick, a banded High Jump Kick, and then later on, if they don't have a way of healing themselves, they're just 2-hit KO'd and fodder later. So this Pokemon really forces its own progress, which I think is really important. It's also fast taunt, it's great with boots, it gets Court Change, which is a really unique move, and it really forces very specific prep. Even if you're not bringing it every week, your opponent may be a little bit more hesitant to hazard stack you, just because of the fact that you can throw it all back on them, which is, very much so less than ideal for a lot of hazard stack builds and a lot of HO builds to just have their hazards completely flipped on them. Thank God that move is not more, like, evenly distributed and it's like only a Cinderace move, because that would be very bad for the metagame. But definitely a great Pokemon, and I love this thing. I think you should definitely consider drafting it. Actually, let's kind of like rank these. I'll put these like this. There we go. Because you're ranking all the other ones besides S tier. It seems kind of dumb. Okay, next up we have Venu. I'm also going to put Venu in B for a very similar reason. I'm actually going to move it all the way up here. Oh, no, move it right here. I'd probably draft Emboar before I drafted Sun. This is solely expecting and drafting Sun. Now, I think if you are drafting Sun, and you get Torkoal, Venu, plus a very threatening fire type, it's really tough for a lot of teams to deal with, and I think Venu can be very threatening offensively. Now, defensively, I think regular Venu very much so lacks, and you gotta have a good ground resist. Otherwise, if you're, picking up Venu, especially if you're picking up Venu Sun, those teams tend to be incredibly ground weak or edge quake weak. Sorry, but those teams seem to be like very edge quake weak. So if you can kind of patch that and use Venu more offensively on Sun, I think it definitely has a very worthwhile niche to be potentially explored, for sure. At least me personally. Next up, Infernape, and I'm really struggling on whether I put this in S tier or A tier. I think I'm gonna put it at the bottom of S. This is a great Pokemon, man. You want to talk about versatility, at least offensive versatility. This thing has it, whether it be physical, special, setting up on the physical side, setting up on the special side, being a Life Orb Wall Breaker, being Banded, Specs, or Scarf, being, what do you call it, even like Rocks variants. I've even seen bulky Slack Off variants for like the Scizor, like Mega Scizor, or like Weavile, or something like that, as it just does naturally take those stabs, and it has, still somewhat passable bulk, I guess. Not the most passable bulk, but it exists. So I definitely think that this Pokemon is very, very much so underexplored, or not underexplored, underrated in a lot of people. Underrated, at least for me, in the sense I think people kind of like pigeonhole it into like, you're the Scarfer with U-turn. I really think this one's really strong and just, really fun to build if you're creative enough, I suppose. Now, that's not saying like I'm the Infernape and innovator, mostly since I see it from other people, obviously, and other people obviously use it very well, or I wouldn't have this opinion of it, because it's not a Pokemon I draft super, super consistently, but I do have a couple championships with it, and I do definitely enjoy it, I think. But yeah, next up, we have Incin, and I think I'm going to put Incin at the top of B. And while I think it's great, I don't think it's necessarily as good as the ones I have in A tier, but it's very good at what it does, and especially in a generation where Boots exists, it gets Intimidate, and it gets U-turn and Parting Shot. That functions as a phenomenal pivot and a phenomenal Dark type to check those offensive Ghosts and Psychics, really being able to munch up like, Stray, Focus Blast, Aura Spheres, and things like that. Incredibly solid Pokemon though. And if anything, the Fire typing kind of helps it defensively and checking those mons, because then you're not weak to Fairy anymore, so they have to run the less reliable Focus Blast in order to hit you, opposed to Dazzling Gleam, which might be able to KO other Darks and things like that. So I overall think Incineroar is great. While it functions great as a pivot and, being annoying Phys-Def or Spadef wise, it can also function with like an AV if you're comfortable in keeping hazards off of the field, or it can function in like a Swords Dancing Flame Charging variant. It can even be weakness policy. Nobody say that to Jason though, because he might have, like PTSD flashbacks to his APA run a couple seasons ago. But I like Incineroar a lot. It's a great pivot. It's a great mon. Next up we have Serp, and this is another one. Might be a hot take. I like Serp. I like Giant Serp. Now it's not as good as it once was, unfortunately. It's just not as good as it once was without hidden power. It doesn't just kind of bully through and push through its counters anymore, but it's very good at what it does in the sense that it forces very specific switch-ins. A lot like Rillaboom, these offensive grasses have the chance to snowball if you don't go into the correct Pokemon on them immediately. And that's what Serp does. So those switches afford it very free knockoffs and afford it very free glares, which is great team support. It also has a really fast defog. I believe it also gets taunt as well. And really, there are some matchups where Serp can steamroll. If you knock off the Boots and the Flying type and they mess up and they let it get up to +4, you might just be able to bully through it. And you have the natural bulk. You might even be able to lift that Flying move from full unless it's like a stab, strong Hurricane coming for your face. I think this Pokemon's very solid for its price point. It's obviously a lot cheaper than it was in like Gen 7, Gen 6. But it does what it's supposed to do at this feature, which it's at. Sub-Leech Serp is also still very annoying as well, and Scarf Serp can really run away with games if you're not careful enough. So very solid. Next up, we'll do Blastoise here, and I'm going to go ahead and also put Blastoise in B tier, and I'm going to go ahead and put it right here, just as this is a Pokemon I draft a lot. I know Kaz was telling me he really does not like this Pokemon. A lot of people really don't like Blastoise, but I think it's a very solid spinner. Honestly, it spreads around passive damage with like Skull Burns and Toxics. It can rapid spin very, very freely on a lot of things. It is just very naturally bulky, and it has the option in very, niche specific matchups to just set up a Shell Smash. Say set up a Shell Smash 10 times fast and then make fun of me for doing that. But yeah, it can just set up a Shell Smash and win through some games. Like Dark Pulse, Ice Beam, Surf, what other coverage does it get? Half of it, I won't lie. But it's really kind of all it needs in a lot of matchups. So I like Blastoise a lot. I think it's very good at what it does and being a nice bulky pivot spinner. It also gets Flip Turn this gen, which is great. Again, functioning as that pivot and pivoting in, maybe rapid spinning, flip turning out. And yeah, really solid bomb. Then last up, we have Chestnut. Now, if this was pre-COVID Chestnut, he'd be up here. It's not pre-COVID Chestnut. So we're going to put him down and see. I think that this thing is draftable, and I have drafted it before. So I'm tempted to almost put it in B tier. We're going to put it at the top of C tier, though, as I have not drafted it in, like, 3 years. So I don't know if we can count it anymore. I don't think I've drafted in Gen 8, at least. And I guess this is a Gen 8 list. It's a solid defensive, grass. And it's a phenomenal Edgequake check. There are not many Pokemon that can take on Edgequake as well as Chestnut. You do have to kind of be careful of that nasty floor times flying weakness, as some of them might have Aerial Ace, and they might be able to just 2-tap you with that. But also that, requires prediction. Leech Seed plus Spiky Shield can be very annoying. It even has, like, the niche, like, Belly Drum Salix sets, which can be very, very terrifying to deal with. But I think what Chestnut does best is going to be spiking up, spreading passive damage with like Leech Seed and Toxic. It also gets Super Fang, which is really, really nice, and really chipping down fat walls and kind of facilitating for the rest of its team. And it's decent enough at it. I just think there are typically better spikers for you to draft on a board if you're playing Nat decks. But and especially when spikes are just not as valuable this gen, at least in my personal opinion, with boots being such a big thing. But yeah. That's going to be the tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your guys' tier list is. I can drop this in the description as well if you guys want to do your own. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what tier list you'd like to see next from a Draft League perspective. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Find the stop recording button later.